You're listening to the Thoroughbred podcast, an elite business leadership podcast.
Hey guys, this is John Wentworth. Welcome back to the Thoroughbred podcast. I certainly appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate all of the 5-star likes, and I appreciate you subscribing. So click that button, subscribe. We're going to continue to bring you, elite information from thoroughbreds. A thoroughbred is an elite business person, and as I've said in the past, I think being an elite business person, it's not about how much money you make. It's about how you serve people. And today we're extremely flattered to have Pastor Jim Wiegand from the Fenton Freedom Center joining us. And before we got on air, we were talking a little bit about what are we going to talk about, which we never really know totally. But Jim, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.
Well, we haven't even begun yet, but it's going to be fun.
You promised me lunch. I showed up.
Oh, yeah. Someone called for lunch. So before we went on the air, one of the things you mentioned was, preaching at a homeless shelter shortly after you met the Lord at a rock concert. So I think that's a really good lead-in. Let's start there.
Yeah. My life doesn't start with elite anything. The family history is addiction and divorce, and it's a real mess. And then
we've got that in common.
Yeah. And there's you become really either the product of that, or there's some decisions that are made either not to fight that or to fight that. I went with not fighting it. I was, by the time I was 16 years old, I was sleeping in the back seat of my 65 Buick Electra. I was
sweet ride.
I was an addict. It was, yeah. It was cool from Florida too. It rusted
You were
from
an
the
addict.
top down.
What does that mean? You were an addict of what?
Yeah, well, alcohol, drugs. That was kind of back in the old days. You had to be rich to do cocaine, and I wasn't rich. Heroin wasn't available where I was at. Thank God.
Thank God.
The opiates weren't out yet, so it was dope. It was. I think that the thing that we enjoyed most was just acid, dropping acid. It wasn't expensive. My parents moved to Florida when I was 16 years old, so there was nobody to catch me, doing it or whatever. Right. So you had time to kind of go on a trip and come back, that kind of stuff.
What do you think takes us to that spot? I always think about the environment and the people we surround ourselves with. And so coming from a broken home, essentially, right?
Yeah.
You end up probably in the wrong circle.
Right. Well, and it's funny because identity is something everybody wants. And hopefully your father says, I'm proud of you. Your mother says, you're the smartest kid at that school. Your girlfriend says, I'm lucky to have you. But, most of the time that doesn't happen in people's lives. So you look for people to say you're welcome here. And sometimes when you have no group, the group that has no standards is the one that's the most welcoming.
That's most welcoming. Yeah. I always say that. I mean, if I'm in a room with a group of people, I say raise your hand if you were raised on guilt and shame.
Yeah, right.
It's 95% of the room.
Yeah, right.
Which is
right.
scary. It really is.
It's a cheap way to motivate people, isn't it? You could build a relationship and call greatness out of them, but that takes trust and that takes time.
Yep.
Or you can say, if you don't do this, you're a loser. And the results can look the same, but they're really not. Why we do what we do is more important than what we end up doing.
Well, and that was very conducive of my upbringing. My dad told me, you're no good. You're never going to be any good. You're never going to make it at anything. You're an all-American screw up.
Yeah.
And it drove me to a point. I mean, I don't want to change anything. You know what I mean? Yeah. I just want to learn how to motivate my children differently.
Right on.
But it did move me to a place where finally I said, watch.
Yeah, right.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't go there. They go the other way.
I didn't have that person. I didn't have that coach or that teacher or that pastor that said, I see something in you and I want to pull it out. What I had was just kind of the path of least resistance. Who won't reject me? That was a certain crowd.
Right.
Who, and at the end of that, you end up becoming a slave to what everybody else is enslaved to. And it wasn't until I walked into this rock concert, because this girl, when you're 16 years old, a girl invites
I'll go
you
wherever, right?
Yeah, girl invites you to hell, you take your squirt gun and go. You know what I mean? So I went. It turned out it was an evangelistic event where there were kids that wouldn't go to church but go to a rock concert, especially if a pretty girl invited them. And it's hard to explain, but I walked in with no religion and a militant atheist. But in that night, I met my Creator, like face to face, walked out, completely changed. And not having read the Bible, not having ever been to church, not having any religious upbringing, I walked out saying it was like I was blind.
And you were how old then?
16. Junior in high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that because I had no upbringing in the church. I had no involvement at all in, it was funny because even without that, I would pray.
Yeah.
Even without that, there was some belief system already built in me.
Sure.
And, but I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
And that wasn't until I went to a men's retreat at St. John's like 7 years ago. But the same thing happened.
Yeah.
I met the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And I walked out of there like, I thought that I was doing things so well.
Yeah.
And I realized, holy cow, I've got so much more to do.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how when people say, how do you mean you met him?
Yeah. You know, I that's why I say it's hard to explain. And I don't mean to make somebody that has something somebody else doesn't, but if you were blind and you never saw, and I said, man, I just saw the color blue. Now, how do I describe to someone who can't see what the color blue is like? Well, it's, red would be hot and blue would be cold. Well, I described heat, but I didn't describe sight. So how do you describe, I think religion gives you the form, teaching gives you the information, maybe your home gives you a foundation, but every person needs their own individual revelation of who God is. And that happens because we seek somebody, we find him. We don't seek somebody, we don't. You know. So you went to a men's retreat knowing it was with the church, knowing what we'd be talking about is
I thought
God,
it'd be good for business.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
yeah,
I was like, there's gonna be a bunch of people there. Well, that'll be great for business.
Yeah, I thought it'd be good for my love life. Yeah,
how'd
not
that
the
work
men's
out?
retreat, by the way, the concert. Yeah. So yeah, it's I think there's a part of us that was looking, but again, how do you give language?
Sure.
I'm empty, but I seem as empty as everybody around me. So I'm normal, I think we look for normalcy.
I mean, I remember specifically, like I cried the entire time. It's an overnight event, and I cried the entire time. People were like a lot of people cry during this, but it's, here and there. Yeah. I cried the entire time.
And that's the Holy Spirit, right?
It's the Holy Spirit, 100%. Yeah. And it was finding that moment of forgiveness for my mom. Yeah, which lifted a huge weight off of me. Yeah. But then the next thing that I realized is that I needed to have forgiveness for my dad too. Yeah. And that took a little bit longer, but literally, I mean, the Holy Spirit came to me at night and it was, I mean, I woke up crying, believe it or not. Yeah. But the moment was a vision of my mom that slowly turned into my wife. And to me, that was God saying to me, it's okay. Yeah. You can let go now. Yeah. Yeah, right on. And the next day, during somebody else's speech, the guy's up on stage, which is like 5 feet from me, and he takes a photograph and he turns it around, and it's my mom.
Okay.
And I'm just, of course, bawling. Right. I'm like, what in the world? And I'm looking and I feel like I'm in a cartoon. Like if I scratch my eyes, that's going to change. Yeah. It was continuum. Finally, I walked up to it and I picked it up, and it wasn't her. It was his wife. Right. But again, that was God pushing that envelope. Yeah. And, and the final thing was there's a chance where you come to the altar with this box of all the stuff that you're able to forgive. Wow. And, again, that's another moment. I mean, just bawling. Everybody left the room. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave my box. And at first I was mad at the box. But that's how I met the Lord, and it was a tremendous blessing. And so that leads into, as on fire as I was then, and for the next 6 months, 1 year, it's difficult to stay burning like that. I mean, it really is. Yeah. How does somebody like me, I would love to protect that a little more. How do you do that?
Well, I think in any relationship, the first 6 months, a year, that's the falling in love. That's the getting to know each other. That's the figuring it out.
Gosh, see, everything's just like dating.
Yeah. Well, there is a romance. There is Ephesians, Paul talks about we are the bride of Christ. So Christ being the groom there, and that's not like we're actually going to be wearing a white dress walking down the aisle, but he's talking about a covenant,
like courting.
There's a type of relationship. So what's the most euphoric months of any relationship? It's going to be the first months, right? But from there's a maturity, there's a decision, there's a covenant, so now I say, do you want to go back and start all over again and fall in love with a new girl, or do you want to stay attached to your wife that you have all this history with? It's a simple answer. I want to keep growing and building it. So I think trying to make it what it was is impossible, because it was what it was because you were blind and you could see. But after a year of seeing, that's just a tree. That's just
point.
A wall.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, but I would say this.
Sometimes I feel guilty for that, and that makes me feel like I don't need to. I think that's a great explanation of, hey, it just is what it is. It's okay. Right. But then how do you still?
Well, I would say this, everybody around me that's a young adult will tell you this. Being single at the Freedom Center is like being on a game show where I get points for setting everybody up. You know what I mean? That's so. If the vicarious joy of seeing someone else fall in love reminds me of that first year, the vicarious joy of seeing somebody go to a retreat and and weep over that box and get free.
Sure.
That's if you want to feel it again and again, then it's vicarious from here on out.
For sure. I mean, when I then got on the committee and ran and set it up, I mean, I invited so many darn people that we had to change the venue. But that's what it was all about, was writing those letters, collecting those letters, sharing those letters, sharing that box, and watching the weeping, and knowing what's going on inside of them. One of my best friends, who's a French Canadian, I mean, same thing, right? Just kind of fell away. A big dude, big strong dude, and I mean, he had a tremendous experience and cried hard and then shared with me, there was way more than you could ever know that's been going on, why that was so powerful for me. So, one of the things for me, I'm just a big believer in people because everybody has stuff at the end of the day, and I think that's just the root of humans. And I just sometimes I wonder, why are people so, like we said before, why are people so worried about where you go to church rather than if you go to church? Yeah,
I think two things are happening. I think unfortunately the church has become a little bit more business-like than it should be. We're actually teaching on this right now, and we're looking at the church as an institution.
But it's got to have funds to run,
Yeah, I mean, not so much. Think of it this way: there's funds to run, but then there's, I'm going to grow my business. Well, how do you do that? Well, there's two ways. You can create a new customer. You can steal a customer from somebody else. You know what I mean? And I think that there's been a dynamic change in the last 2 decades of the church. Used to be everybody went to church. Then people stopped going to church for the most part. And then we started, the bigger the church, the better the church. There's only 2% of the churches in the United States that have an attendance of 1,000 people or more. So those are the people that write the books, teach the seminars, the podcasts are listened to. So the unconscious message is bigger is better. But your experience didn't happen in a stadium. Your experience happened at a men's retreat. So that's not true. My experience happened with 100 kids, 150 kids at a concert. Sure. So that's not true. The size of the crowd does not determine fruitfulness. Right. And you can't define it as success. So what happens is, if we're not careful, we begin to say, not only is our church good, our church is better than blah, blah, blah. Now compound that with a pastor who's been theologically trained. And the reason there is a college for the Baptists, for the Methodists, for the Assemblies of God, for the Catholics, and so forth, is because there's a firm belief in those who lead those institutions that they have a greater substance in their truth than other truths. So when we teach at the university level, I've taught PhD classes, when you're doing that, what you say is, this is what others believe, this is why we believe they're in error, and this is what we believe. Now, when we as pastors and leaders and priests and rabbis start talking, we have a firm belief that our beliefs are better than everybody else's beliefs, and we're in competition with others. Can you see what the problem is?
Well, it sounds like realtors. They all have a firm belief that they're better than everybody else because of these reasons.
And I think they're sincerely held wrong beliefs. So I think the guy that's going to win in the end, especially in the church world, is the giver, not the getter. It's the one that's blessing everybody, not cursing everybody, and we're the only blessed place. Sure. I think it's very dangerous, even cult-like, to believe we're the only ones that really have it. Right. And everybody else, therefore, is lost and wrong.
But don't you think, though, too, like, and I'm not, I don't talk about any of that stuff because I don't know anything about it. But, I just remember, like, a mother and a child arrived at my doorstep one day, which, we live in a spot that it's not like walking traffic, so it was different. And I opened the door, and, it's a lady and her child, who was probably, I was going to guess 8 or 9. Yeah. And I go, hey, how you guys doing? They said, we're great. And then she deferred to her son, and they said, we're Jehovah Witness. Would you mind if we read a verse to you from the Bible? And I said, no, I'd love it. Read it.
Say no to a 9-year-old kid. What kind of person are you?
But I said, no, I'd love it. Read it. Now, I had already had my experience. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I know me, so I still would have said read it, but I really wanted to hear it. I didn't care where it came from because it came from the book. And yes, I know they have their beliefs and they pick out their spots and change that. But the ironic thing was, it was beautiful, the verse, by the way. And about 2 years later, now this is really ironic, This is the Lord. When my dad got really sick, like he was on a ventilator for 2 weeks, damn near died. Right. I just swore. I want to talk about that too. But, so when he was released from the hospital, we moved him into our house. He lived with us for about 6 months. And so as he started to get better, he was driving me around to my appointments. Right. That was a way for me to get him back outside. It was a way for me to spend some time with him. Right. And we did not have a good relationship. And, and so it was a little bit a little bit awkward, actually. He ended up going to the retreat also and was saved, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And he's actually, I'm giving him a shout out now, not like he's going to be listening to a podcast. He doesn't even know what that is. But when he was sick at our house and we didn't have a relationship, he didn't have anywhere else to go. So he was in our house. And I talked about this a little bit actually when I spoke at the Freedom Center, but he was on a ventilator for 2 weeks. So he was very frail. And to walk that person to the shower and shower him and then put lotion on the feet of this man, I could never have done that prior to meeting the Lord.
Right.
I never could have. But because I had forgiven him, and it was still hard because you don't forget.
Yeah.
But I never could have done that. And so, long story short, where we ended up in a different space was he drives me to this home, get out, go to the front door. Lady answers the door, and I said, hello. And she said, hello. And I said, you look familiar. And she said, we were at your house 2 years ago.
Wow. She remembered just like that, huh? Wow.
Well, I'm sure she knew when she called me.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And so her son was there, and they were moving to Florida. And that's just an example of why, you treat everybody good.
Absolutely.
And I just, so it always intrigues me because not having any involvement in the church other than my grandma dragging me once in a while when I was there. It always intrigues me, all of these different things. And, as you know, I'm Catholic. I attend St. John's, but I come to your church as well. And I love it there, I think that it just is an intriguing question to me.
Yeah.
And I know that people say, well, like if they see me here, they go, well, weren't you just at the Freedom Center?
Right.
And I go, yeah. Well, weren't you just at St. John's? I hear it from both sides.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, and I'm going to keep doing that. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about, get off of that subject a little bit, I guess. But just tell me about your family, your hobbies.
Wow.
What do you do when you're not preaching, which is probably preaching? But tell me about we know JD. Tell us, just a little bit about, for the listeners that don't know your wife and don't know JD and don't know your daughter, all these other people. Do you have a daughter?
In-law.
In-law, okay.
Yes,
So that's a daughter. Just tell us a little bit about your family and who you are.
Yeah, so 29 years ago, I'm standing in the foyerway in Mesa, Arizona, and my pastor's wife, I'm serving as a youth pastor, my pastor's wife comes in and says, hey, why don't you meet this family? They just showed up, and they're looking for a church. So I get out of the broom closet that is my office, and I walk down the stairs, and there is this 19-year-old, now I'm 22, she's 19, and she's got on a pink shirt, blue jean coveralls. She's got on white Converse high tops with the red star on the heel. She has Farrah Fawcett hair.
I think Chris is wearing those.
Oh my
God! Yeah, see,
and he has Farrah Fawcett hair too. Yeah, and man, I said, hi, my name's Jim, and she has this Oklahoma accent. She goes, my name's Dana. And we had this great little conversation, just getting to know everybody, and this is what we do, and you're welcome. We hope to see you again. She walked out the door, and the guy that I was standing with, he was the church janitor. He was a state wrestling champion, so he's got the build of the Tasmanian devil. He's a triangle, upside down triangle. And he said, man, she's cute. If she comes to this church, I'm going to ask her out. And I turned to him, I said, you do, and I'll break both your legs. And he said, what? I said, that's the girl I'm going to marry. So she ended up coming to the church. We were best friends for 6 to 8 months. And then I asked her on the first date, and she said yes. And we were very accountable to everybody around us. Just did it right. You know what I mean? 3 weeks to the day of our first date, I asked her to marry me. And she said no. And then the next day said yes. She repented of her sins, John. She got right with God. And that was 29 years ago. And then, within a short amount of time, our son Joshua was born. He's 27. And then 3 years later, our son JD was born. And
is JD's name JD?
It's James David Jr.
Gotcha.
So we call him JD because if he's in trouble, I don't want to jump. So he goes, James David, I don't want to be the one that. So it's JD, that kind of stuff. So, but they gave us very little trouble. They had a couple of friends that were trouble, but for the most part, they never gave us a bit of trouble. And awesome kids. And Joshua got married 5 years ago, our oldest, and to our absolutely perfect daughter-in-law. I mean, I never really wanted a daughter because I wouldn't know how to wrestle with one or teach one how to shoot or, got a deer with your daughter. I wouldn't know how to do that. But we got this daughter-in-law that if I could make one out of spare body parts, that's who she is. She's perfect. And then they gave us our first grandson, December 15th, awesome. Hollis James Wiegand, the first. And he's brilliant in every way, On his worst day, he's just a little less than perfect, according to Grandpa anyway.
So how do you, we always hear grandparents say, oh, it's so much better to have grandparents than children. And maybe you're not quite there yet because the baby's a baby.
Yeah, it's 4 months old. No, everything's a mystery until you experience it. You know what I mean? All my married friends, you got to get married. It's like, can't be that great. You get married, that's that great. And, you become that guy that says, and they have kids. Sure. Oh, you got to have kids. But then you have them. Grandkids were, I loved my children so much for so long. You almost think it can't be better than that. How could this be better? But it is, and it's
Sorry, JD.
It's just different. Yeah, it's better, I think, because when he cries, he's not my problem.
You can hand him back
Yeah,
over.
when he smells, it's not my problem. And when he's hungry, it's not my problem. So all I have to do is enjoy this evolving, adorable, chunky monkey, being. And
Right.
it is the best part of my day. We just got to spend a week in Dallas over spring break. Josh, Lauren, and Hollis came with us. So I got to be a part of his daily routine, the good morning.
And then you got to
giggles.
leave.
Oh, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, he takes a nap every 2 hours. I take one every 4 hours. So we
worked
got
out
along really
perfect.
well. Yeah, did a double shift. So
Tell us about your childhood, your parents, your
Yeah.
upbringing. You mentioned you came from a broken home. I guess dive into that a little bit more. I can certainly relate to that. And it's funny when I give my witness. I always say to people before I do this, I don't want you to feel bad for me, and I don't want you to because some people said I feel bad that I had such a good upbringing. Well, don't feel bad. Embrace that.
Right on. Yeah.
Right. So tell us about a little bit about that.
My
Whichever
father,
you want to share.
My father passed away about a year and a half ago of Alzheimer's. He was an executive for Ford Motor Company, one of the pioneering engineers of the Taurus project. He was in charge of that. So Motor Trend Car of the Year came out of my dad's head. You know what I mean? And one of their flagship brands
Right.
for years. So highly successful, extraordinarily motivated, sharp as a whip, and then a year later doesn't know who he is and who you are. That was devastating.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
when my parents were when I was 5, my parents split up. My mom and my father both immediately were into new relationships. I moved to Florida. I had 4 first grade teachers because of the separation
Right.
and the moving. And life's pretty normal. My older
I
brothers
had
and sisters.
4 first grade teachers too. That's just because
Really?
they all kicked me out of their
that's
class.
So funny. Yeah. I got straight A's. Hey, Wiegand, shut up. Hey, Wiegand, give me that knife. So we moved to Florida. Everything's new. I'm one of a small number of Caucasian kids in a neighborhood that didn't have a lot of Caucasians. I'm getting beat up every day. I'm scared, but it's funny when you're a kid. Everything's normal. Nothing.
Yeah, for
not,
sure.
And everything's pleasant, but everything's normal.
It's like when we went to Haiti. So,
Yeah.
we went to Haiti
Right.
together, which was an amazing trip. But that was one of the things that stood out to me the most is the kids didn't care.
No idea. They're dirt poor.
They have no clue.
Yeah.
But the 16, the 15, 16, 17-year-olds,
Right.
I felt odd around because
Yeah.
they looked at us differently.
Yeah, don't look at me like I'm a zoo animal that needs your pity. Yeah,
Right.
they resent it,
Right.
and rightly so. We didn't look at them that way. We
No,
looked at them
of
with
course
great
not.
potential, but
Right.
they're afraid of that. Take the picture with the poor Haitian kid. They've caught on to the fact that
Right.
that some people are on vacation, some people are on mission. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
And we were on mission, and we loved them. So anyway, but we moved around a lot. Ended up back in Michigan. My dad was in construction, so we built a home, lived in it for 6 months, and built the next one. Constantly buying, flipping, selling, remodeling, all that stuff. That's how we made our living primarily. And older brothers and sisters. I'm the youngest of the 7 children between the 2 families, so I got left out of a lot of the drama. You do what you're told as long as there's ice cream at the end of the meal, everybody's happy. We had seasons of poverty that I wasn't really aware of. We had seasons of great hardship and strife I wasn't aware of. The kids were, my older brothers and sisters were doing a lot of drugs and partying. And I remember coming home and the house was loaded with kids I didn't know. My dad yelling
Right.
at them. But I don't remember. Again, everything's normal until you have something to compare it to. And at 7, 8, 9, what are you comparing
Right,
it to?
exactly.
It's my life, and I didn't know other people's lives were different. So as you get older, because I was the youngest, it was I had a lot more freedoms because they were kind of not done raising kids, but they knew not to be so anal about it. You know what I mean? So that gave me some freedom. I didn't always use it the right way. But at 16, they moved to Florida. My dad was broke his back in 3 places in a construction accident. My stepfather did, rather. So they moved away. Gave me the option to go with them or to stay. And so I stayed. And like you would say, don't feel bad for me. I'm Huckleberry Finn. I get to live in a 65 Buick Electra, go anywhere I want, skip any day of class I want. I'm having maybe one of the greatest times in my entire life. So this poor homeless hungry kid, I was hungry, but I go to the bowling alley and they had the old bus trays.
Right.
They'd bust the tables. I just grabbed some pizza or have a burger, whatever it was. And I ate, and it was poverty, but it was fun. It was an adventure. So I graduated high school. My sister's brilliant. The joke is my sister graduated Sigma Cum Laude. I graduated Oh Thank You Laude. It's by the grace of God they let me out.
No
And
doubt.
I got tired of people telling me what to do, so I joined the Army, which seemed to make sense in 1983, but didn't make sense overall. And loved the military, what it gave to me and what I was able to give to it, and law enforcement and all that stuff. So. And then went back to my addictions. That concert gave me an experience, but I went back to my addictions in the military. And
So after meeting the Lord, you went back.
I went back. Yeah. A concert, a men's retreat's great, but without something to build your life on, without teaching, without
and
friendship.
that's what we talked about earlier. How do you continue to cultivate that? You can't stay on fire.
Yeah,
you can't. That first 6 months, like you said, you can't. Reenact.
Yeah.
You can't It's like meeting your wife the first time.
Yeah.
You can't go back there. So continue. I don't want to interrupt that.
So I fell into my old habits. But I had this guy who used to knock on my door every Sunday morning, say, "I'm going to church. Do you want to go?" The problem is, if you're drunk from Saturday night, you don't
want to go.
It's almost like that. As soon as I get in shape, I'll go to the gym. As soon as I get sober, I'll go to church. And that's one of the misnomers, I think, is that you got to be good enough to go to church, or have the right clothes to go to church, or have the right bag, and you don't. The only two places in our culture where you have to be right before you feel good going there is the gym and the church. I wouldn't say, "Man, I'm so hungry," but as soon as I get fed, I'll go to the restaurant. I'm so entertained, but as soon as I'm bored, I'll go to the movies.
Right.
So why? I think we've put way too much emphasis on
maybe those are the
morality.
two places that people know they need to go most, but just don't.
Yeah, but if the church is eating your broccoli and doing your biceps, something's missing. And I think if I'd have found a mandatory relationship, a religious relationship with a local church, I don't think it would have. I think I'd have found excuses not to go and gone less and less and so forth. But I found friendship. I found family.
Right.
I found people literally adopted me as a GI. Like, "You're welcome to come sleep at our ranch in Texas." And I became one of their sons, and we slaughtered the pigs together, and we played with the puppies together. I mean, if it hadn't been for the Crumley family, which will never hear this, but it hadn't been for the Crumley family who adopted me, showed me what a husband and wife and a Bible and children and a home, and really modeled it for me. I can't say I'd be here today, because that first step, something's born, that's a miracle, but it takes something more to grow into maturity. And so, the first breath is an exciting moment, but there's a million breaths afterwards. You need someone to teach you, how to walk and how to eat and everything else.
Well, and I think you've got to be open to it too. It's just like, until you're ready, you're not ready. And no matter what people say, you're not ready. And I always say, the highest form of human persuasion is figuring it out on your own. And wanting and having that desire to do something differently. And I think that self-reflection, and sometimes I beat myself up, but my wife will say to me, "Why are you so hard on yourself about that?" Because I'll say, and it could be relative to the Lord or other things, because I'm always self-reflecting on it. And sometimes you do it maybe a little bit too much.
Right. Well, I think, again, we talk about a cheap way to motivate people. Let's make them feel guilty.
Sure.
Let's create pain. If I can heat up the chair you're sitting on, I can motivate you to move.
Right.
So,
but I'm just going to move to the next chair and do the same thing.
Yeah. And I think is the goal to move me, or is the goal to actually be moved?
Right.
And that's where inspiration, relationship, consistency, mentoring, fathering, mothering. This is why, you look at the Bible, the greatest people in Scripture all had a dad or a mentor, all of them. So that, Joshua does great things that Moses wanted to do but never got to. But Joshua had Moses. You know what I mean?
Right.
The disciples got to do things that Jesus always wanted to do, but his time on earth was short. But he sent them out to complete that work. There's a long going thing. We need relationship. If we didn't need relationship, Jesus would have said, "I wrote a book, everybody read it." Instead, he said to his disciples, "Follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men." So there's something in the dust on the road. There's something in the food as you sit around. There's something in the middle of the night when you hear a prayer. There's something about not just educating somebody, but sharing life with them, where iron sharpens iron.
Yeah, no doubt. You said a lot of things in there that are interesting. On our first retreat, it was fishers of men. That we are fishers of men. The next one was iron sharpens iron, and that's something we talk about here at the office a lot, about iron sharpening iron. And when we talk about being business elite, to me that's never about, well, how much money do you have? It's about, how are you treating other people with the platform that you're given? So I'll ask you this question, because this is something that I struggle with. I know that, and I'm able to say this today differently than I would have 2 years ago, because I've learned to embrace it a little bit. But I struggle with the platform that the Lord has given me. I know that it's there, and I don't ever want to be perceived as the guy in the billboard. Because I am.
Right.
I am perceived that way, even though that's not who I am. People say, "Oh, look at that guy." I always say he's a dork, because I am a dork, but I'm fine with it. But look at that guy. He thinks he's so cool. It's difficult for me to embrace, and again, I can say this differently today than I could before, because I'm learning it. And maybe more so than learning it, I'm just actually embracing it. But I still struggle with that, and so I say to you, I struggle with taking the platform the Lord has given me and doing something bigger with it, which I am now doing. And one of the things that really propelled this is one of my mentors said to me, in regards to the relationship with my mother and all of those things that I endured as a child, and continued with my dad, is I always wanted to wait until my grandmother passed to share the story about my mom. And I still haven't fully shared it. Right. I know that it's slowly going to come out as we're doing these things, and bits and pieces of it have. Right. But, I thought I want my grandmother to pass first because I don't want her to know, this burden that I carried until 5 years ago, my entire life. No one knew. Right. And so I didn't want my grandma to know. And now my grandmother's passed, God rest her soul. Yeah. And now it's, I don't want her sister and brother to know. Yeah. And my mentor finally said, you're worried about 2 when you can affect 20,000. Right. Or 2,000. You're worried about 2 when you can affect 2,000. Stop it.
Right. And you can share that story without demonizing your mother.
Sure.
I don't know what happened, John, but I'll bet you whatever happened, I bet you something like that happened to her, that she was just as much a victim as she was a perpetrator. You know what I'm saying? And it doesn't make anything right, but perspective helps us see where people are coming from. There's no excuses, but there are reasons why people behave the way
and
they
ironically, when I got sober the first time, I like to get sober a lot, but when I got sober the first time, one of the things that I did, now I'm trying to deal with all of this in real life, because before, I started drinking when I was 13. Yeah. And so on and off all of my life, I was in that, and I would have moments of, okay, I got to get focused, but then you're always drawn back. I was always drawn back in. Yeah. But at this time, I'm like, I really have to get my stuff together. Yeah. I didn't swear, Chris.
Yeah, it was right there.
Yeah. And so I started going to counseling.
Yeah.
Well, the counselor knew my mother. He counseled her in high school.
Okay.
And I'm like, huh? And he said, yes. And he said, she was into a lot of drugs, and the kind of drugs they did then altered your mind.
Yes, they did.
And so it gave me a little bit of clarity. It made me understand a little bit, and at that time I wasn't looking to necessarily forgive her, because I didn't know what forgiveness truly meant. Right. And if you don't know what forgiveness truly means, then you're harboring something that you don't need to harbor. Right. And so it was just interesting to hear that. It gave me some perspective, maybe a little bit of clarity. Yeah.
And again, I think understanding why people do what they do does not excuse what they've done.
Sure.
It hurts, it matters, it's wrong. But if I can understand that the person who cut me off in traffic and got out of his car and wants to beat me up had a father that was a violent man, now all of a sudden, instead of him being a real a-hole, and I didn't cuss, but I came close. You know what I mean?
I'm proud of you.
That was, instead of him being a real a-hole.
You freed me a little.
And making me one, now I go, okay, well, that guy's a victim of his environment. Like he's so afraid that he has to puff himself up as a violent man to compensate for a man who was never going to strike him back anyway. If he'd have waved to me, I'd have waved back, it'd have been over with. But he was afraid. And fear needs power to not be afraid. Right. The quickest way to power is, anger is never a primary emotion. It's only a secondary one. I'm jealous, so I became angry. I was afraid, so I became angry. I was hurt, so I became angry. So, anytime, this is a good example that why people do what they do is often because something's been done to them. It doesn't excuse anything they've done.
Right.
But it helps us to understand that by the grace of God, we were the next generation of that being done as well. And if it hadn't been for the intervention and the forgiveness,
then we stop it.
Dude, it's
and that's huge. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
That goes back to being raised on fear and guilt, and shame is like, and I look at all of the stuff, the things that my dad said to me, the belittling, and I love you, Dad. I know you're never going to hear this, but, and he is, he's a great person, and he's been saved by the Lord, and he's in a great place right now. Yeah. He's a pastoral committee. He's a lunch liaison. These are things that he lived at the VFW prior to that.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I don't know. I think it's really interesting when you can be open and when you can be thoughtful and when you can be intentful on understanding, okay, somebody else has pain too. Somebody else has been, I always say, everybody has their stuff.
Yeah.
I really say shit. I have to say it. Everybody has their shit. They do. Everyone does. And I think when people start to think that they're more important than somebody else, or they're bigger than somebody else, or they're, that's why I embrace everybody every time I see people, because I love people, and I know that everybody has their stuff, and it just, what a different world it would be if everybody were
Right.
mindful
The
of
older
that.
we get, the more understanding we are of humanity, right? The younger we are, the more idealistic we are, the more it's got to be this way. And
Right.
if you don't vote this way or read this version of the Bible or go to this church, I don't know anybody who's old that feels that way. You know what I mean? The older people tend to go, well, I lived long enough through enough elections to realize politicians do what they do. But,
Right.
But you know, I remember being so upset about politics several years ago. An election went a different direction than I wanted it to go, and I was so upset about it. And I really felt like God spoke to me. And I don't say that lightly. I felt like God said, "You're all upset about a national issue. You have one vote. You've cast it. You've got a kid across the street though that doesn't know how to play baseball, and you're so upset watching the news that you're ignoring it. A world you can involve yourself in and change. So go play catch with your son and invite the kid across the street to come over and play catch with you." And we chose to do that. You know, come join us.
The news is not allowed on TV at our house.
Yeah.
You know, occasionally when the in-laws visit, the news is on and then it gets turned off. I believe it's. I mean, I just think, you know, politics are goofy to me. Most people to me do whatever their parents did. They never listened to their parents their entire life, but now they do what they did.
Yeah.
You know, and without their own ideal on it. I feel like there's not a lot of studying that goes into it. I'll do what you did.
Right.
And then you could put this channel on because it tells you what you want to hear.
Exactly.
But that channel's bad because it tells it. But then but the other half of America is watching that channel because
Right.
it's
polarizes
just,
everybody.
It's very strange to me.
When was the last time on TV you saw a sincere debate between two people of differing opinions that had goodwill towards each other? When was the last time an evolutionist and a creationist, or an atheist and a Catholic, it's not entertaining enough. What we have is people living in a beach house that are so immature, but they're physically beautiful to look at, all getting, you know, in hot tubs together. Like and the reason it's there is because there's a market for it. But literally, I sat next to a TV executive on a plane the other day, and he said, "So tell me what you'd want to see on TV." And I said, "I would want to see two people of goodwill debating sincerely a topic." He said, "It'll never happen. It's just not sexy enough. It's not violent enough."
I would agree with him. I wouldn't want to watch that either.
I said, but
I get your point.
Whoever's proven wrong gets a pie in their face from a woman in a bikini. Can we just make everybody happy at that point? I'm happy too. And there was no way to do it.
Swearing. Let's talk about swearing because we've already talked about it a little bit, and I struggle with this. And Chris will share with you. I sent him a text while he was on vacation. I just was, Chris follows me around and videos and helps and does all kinds of stuff. And when I'm passionate, when I'm in the moment, which is when I operate the best, I swear more. Mm-hmm. And it's like when I'm constantly thinking about that, I take myself out of the moment. Mm-hmm. How is that? How does God see that? Because I had a client of mine one time who became a friend, and he said, you swear a lot. And I said, okay. He said, well, the Lord, I don't swear at all. And I said, okay. He said, well, the Lord came to me one day and said, don't swear. And I said, okay. Right. He hasn't told me that.
Yeah.
Now I'm still conscious of it. What is too much? How do you, seriously, because this is something that I struggle with, especially now being on TV, essentially. Facebook is television, so being on TV all the time.
Yeah.
It's, I want to be me, but I also don't want to have to think to not swear every second of the time that I'm talking to you like I am today.
Right. I think that certain behaviors have a fruitfulness, but again, we talk about guilt and shame and pain, and I think to scream at a kid that you're mad at and cuss words are coming out is actually verbal abuse.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I think when you're motivating a football team and you throw in a colorful adjective in a passionate moment, I think it illustrates this is an important. Can you give us an example? No, it just means this is an important moment. I'm reaching for every tool in my tool chest to get you to see you got to play better defense. You need to get off your and if you never cuss them, the one time you do, it's an exclamation point in bold print, all capital letters. But I would say this, what has God said about our language? Before the fall of man, words are used for three reasons. They're used to create, they're used to bless, and they're used to set in order. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and God said, let there be. You know what I mean? On the seventh day, you're going to rest. He put in order. God blessed Adam and Eve, said, be fruitful and multiply. So words before the fall really are just for creation, setting in order, and blessing. After the fall, immediately language is perverted. It's not me, it's the woman. No, it's not me, it's the snake. It's the blame and shame game with our mouth.
Describe the fall.
So the serpent comes to Eve and says, did God really say? And Eve falls for it. Adam is there and he's silent. They both commit sin by doing what God. I mean, there's only one thing on the entire planet.
I knew that, by the way. I just wanted him to clarify for everyone.
There's only one thing on the entire planet that's forbidden. Like the whole 25,000 miles in every direction, go everywhere, do everything, see everything, swim everywhere, climb everything. The one thing you can't do, because love always has to be a choice, has to be a preference. So the one thing that he said not to do is the one thing they did. You know what I mean? So
those two.
Yeah. I'm glad we're so much better than they are. We'd never do that, right? But I look at it and I just, after the fall, man, there's all kinds of stuff. So I would say this, rather than saying I'm going to try not to cuss, maybe we should say, how do I get my words to go back to the original created intent of language, to create, to set in order, and to bless? If all we did every day was create, the creative thinking, we set in order. Hey, we're going to start at this time. We're going to that time. It costs this much money. This many people are going to show up, and we blessed. You did a great job, son. You're the most beautiful princess in the world, sweetie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that's all we do with our language, I think we're money ahead than reaching for the colorful metaphors in the end. So,
most definitely.
So to say I'm going to reach for this.
To do that, you have to have buy-in from everybody, from that audience, and that's I think what you said is sometimes when that football coach is saying get off your he's really saying it to some of the room, not all of the room. Yeah, sure. And I think the team's because
playing.
If they were all off of it, he wouldn't have to use it.
Right. Yeah. I think again, fear in that setting, in the military is a good example. I didn't play football. I was in the pep band. I wasn't an athlete. I was an athletic supporter, is what I was told. So, but the in that room with my drill sergeant, he motivated me to do things I didn't know I could do. When I was done, he educated me through verbal stimulation to I was only about 40% of the way my capacity. And by the terror of having three, drill instructors dogging you, cussing out your mama and your ancestors and your dog, all of a sudden you can do, I could only do 20 of these. Now all of a sudden I can do 50 of these. What just happened was I found a greater gear. And I think there was a time and a place for that, but they're training you for war. I mean, they're training you for blood.
Yeah, they're not training you to.
So I think there are extreme situations where language can be bent for purpose. But I think if every sentence has a colorful metaphor in it, then it loses that benefit altogether.
Sure.
And then you're just kind of a potty mouth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're kind of a guy who doesn't have self-control. You know what I mean?
That's a great way to put it.
So I think if people are saying, John, man, I think you'd come across more
they're
professional.
Not.
You know what I mean? Yeah, we're saying that one friend or whatever.
Yeah.
Then someone's telling you something, someone cares enough to tell you something. And I think instead of saying, I'm going to try not to cuss, I'm going to try to say something that's fruitful. And I think if you focus on the second one, the first one goes away.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. I like it. Okay. What are some of your challenges being a pastor at a church?
People.
So then you got to say swear.
People. There's a joke amongst pastors. The ministry would be so great if it wasn't for all the people. I think there's been keys, though. You talk about high-level thoroughbred type stuff. Here's one. I am every man's servant, but I only have one master. And if I, in the course of time, frustrate the people that I am bent on serving because I'm obeying my master, I've still had a really good day. And opinions and social media opinions and likes and stars, they come and go, man. People that hate you are more likely to give you a review than people that love you because they love you. Everybody loves you. I don't even need to do it. I go to a restaurant, I enjoy a meal. I don't think about putting in 5 stars. But if I get a bad meal, it's like, I need to make them pay for that. They should have done a better job. So I think we live in a world where one person can say something so hurtful that we'd rather not deal with it at all. And I think ignoring humanity is a fool's game, but I also think listening to humanity is a fool's game.
Oh, no doubt.
So what's right, what's wrong? At the end of the day, there's 2 things that I know God measures. I don't know if he measures dollars. I don't know if he measures days. I don't know if he measures success in any way that I would. But I know this. I know that at the end of my life, I get to hear either well done, good and faithful servant. So fidelity and quality are being measured, or I don't. I don't hear those words. So when I get to the end of the day, if the quality and the fidelity to what I believe God wants me to do with all my heart today is sound, then if I get a 2-star review and the pastor joked around too much and he said a-hole on a podcast and I'm not going to, then you just deal with it. There's about 3% of the people that are going to hate you no matter what. Unfortunately, they all have thumbs. And they're all very brave on social media. The slacktivists, you know what I mean? They're not activists, they're slacktivists. They don't do anything, they just complain about everything. So we live in a day and age where everybody can jump on what you've built and say you're the biggest idiot in the world. That's hard, you know what I mean? But so I think you say, what's the hardest thing about anything today? It's going to be people. Yeah.
Well, it's the same with our business. I mean, it's the people are the reason why we do what we do, because we love that like today I went over to a client of ours home, and their home was already sold. The deal fell apart, and I went over there to talk to her and hug her and spend time with her and console her and counsel her. And then we ended up moving a bunch of her furniture to get the house ready for the weekend. So, that's why we do what we do. And then the other part of the people is the people that backed out.
Yeah.
3 weeks in. And so, and she was gracious and very kind. Sometimes that same exact situation, I get yelled at.
Yeah. Like I have somebody
for something out of my control.
Yeah. But again, there goes that anger again. They're angry because something happened, and to regain some sense of, I used to be a cop. So if I'm not in control, then I'm in danger. There's only two things to do. I walk up on a car. I just pulled over. I don't know who's inside, what they've done. I just know their lights out. I walk up on that car. I'm either in complete control of that entire circumstance, or I'm in danger for my life, and I have a goal to go home at the end of the day. That translates really into a lot of life. And so as a pastor, I'm not in control. God's in control.
Sure.
And that's where faith comes in. Sure. I'm not in control. God's in control. But I still like to be in control. I am not a control freak, but I am a freak, and I like a lot of control. That's a joke on my staff. But it's true. You know what I mean? I want things a certain way, a certain quality, a certain caring to be seen. But I look at what's the greatest joy of real estate, of pastoring? It's people. What's the greatest burden? What's the greatest pain? It's people.
Well, and then maybe that's what makes that win so much better, is because it's still the people.
Yeah.
What about books?
Yeah.
What do you read for inspiration? I'm reading a book actually right now by Adam Rosselmeyer, that spoke at the Visions conference.
Okay, cool.
Did I say his last name right?
I don't think so. Adam from Ohio?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I got Rosselmeyer stuck in my head. I'll get it in a second.
But we already have a Jen from Ohio on our team. Now I got to say Adam from Ohio. Yeah. Anyway, shout out to Adam. I spoke to him on the phone. I just was very intrigued by him. And
Rissmiller.
Yes, Rissmiller. And that goes back to one of the things that I mentioned earlier about embracing this platform and always wobbling with that. But he sent me an awesome book. It's called
Traction?
Called to Create.
Okay.
He told me about Traction.
Yeah.
I haven't read that one yet.
He's a big advocate of the book Traction.
Yeah. And I haven't read Called to Create yet because I'm good for about a chapter a week because my reading is terrible. But that's a book that I'm reading and trying to understand for some self-improvement and reflection. So what are some books that you would recommend or are reading now?
I go through spurts. I go on binges of research, and I'll get into something really scholarly for a year, and then I'll get when I've read something for the 100th time, I can't find new information on it, I stop buying those books and reading those blogs and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll get into like entertaining reading. I'm on vacation. I actually like to write. So a lot of my time that I would spend reading, I'm now, I turned 50 2 years ago. So I'm starting to write more than read. I like business books a lot. I think people have thought a lot more about a dollar than they have about a soul. But if you just replace the word dollar with the word bill, friend, neighbor, the words are still very true. So, and if souls were dollars, we'd have won them all by now. And if there were votes, we'd have won 51% of them. Right. People don't think as much about their neighbor's soul as they do about, the success in other ways.
Sure.
So I love business books. I love entrepreneurial thought. I love Jeff Walker, Platform University. That was a great book. All the stuff by, what's his name? Tim, 4-Hour Work Week. He's you know what I'm talking about? He wrote the 4-Hour Work Week. He's got a great show on cable. He's got a
Chris will Google it.
Yeah. It's Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss.
Yeah. He's a nut. I would want to go fishing with him for a week. I would not want to be his neighbor. You know what I mean? He cheats to win and laughs about it. But he's a genius. He might be an evil genius at times, but he's a genius. I like articles. I like smaller. I like chapters versus entire books as well. I like stories. Mark Twain is one of the wisest men.
Have you ever read Old Yeller?
No, I cried at the movie, so I didn't.
It's about the only book I read until I was 30.
Yeah.
Literally.
Did you cry during the books? I cried at the Disney film. I saw it in the theater when I was a child. I thought, what kind of sick, why'd you make it? And it's two, why would you bring your child to it? What's wrong with you guys? Let's go to the movies. It's a Disney film. It's about shooting dogs.
What's your favorite Bible verse? And actually, let's just hear it.
Yeah. Ephesians chapter, I just taught it this morning. I taught a round table for pastors. Ephesians 2:10 says, we are God's workmanship, We're created in Christ Jesus to do good works that God prepared in advance for us to do. What that tells me is nothing is an accident. Nothing. Every day is filled with purpose. It is an adventure to be discovered. God has hidden nothing from me, but he's hidden everything for me. And I live on a perpetual Easter egg hunt for his blessings, for wisdom, for friends, for, heaven on earth. It's a brilliant, to me, it's a brilliant way to face every day, that today is an adventure, and God in his sovereignty before the foundations of the world has orchestrated all of life to encounter me today and me to encounter it today in a meaningful way. So I am not an accident. Matter of fact, that scripture, you look at the timing of it, that he prepared in advance for us. So he didn't make me and try to find something for me to do. There was actually something for me to do that he created me to be. And it's I love that. I have no intentions of retiring. Why would you ever stop being on a scavenger hunt? Why would you ever stop going garage sailing or fishing or hunting or whatever? Is you just love that finding and discovering. So every day is a treasure hunt.
I struggle with reading the Bible. I try, and I'm just not a good reader, as I mentioned. But Ronnie Medawar is a good friend of mine. He said, you're a very good direction taker. Just read a proverb every day.
Yeah.
And I started reading those. I'm like, how could this be written so long ago and it's exactly the correct today?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is when my dad was sick in bed, I read a proverb to him every day.
Yeah.
And that was just such a blessing to be able to do that. And, he would grunt and groan and not want to hear it initially. And I just kept reading and reading and reading and reading. And it's just, the rest is history.
I'd say this. I'd say what I do is I read until something hits me, and then I stop reading and I let it hit me. Because I think it wasn't created to be memorized as much as it was created to inspire us to live a certain way. So I read I read the entire Bible in a year. I don't do that anymore. I did it to say I read it. But once I did it, I found at the end of it, it was drudgery. It was homework. It was a chore.
Yeah, and that's what happens to me is I try to, I'm going to read a chapter, and then I don't remember a darn thing from it.
Right. I would rather memorize a word and think deeply about one word in one sentence, in one paragraph, in one book, and actually live the word. I mean, if we read it for a purpose, if we read it to say we did, then I can check the box. If I read it to affect my life, it's a key to unlock everything I'm created to be. Then again, it's another scavenger hunt. But again, I've memorized hundreds of verses. It was part of my discipling process was to memorize 10 verses a week for 52 weeks. So my final exam was 520 word for word scriptures from a brain that had been on acid all throughout the 80s. Right. So now we're gonna figure this. But I did it, and it's been bedrock for my life because now I don't need to have a book in front of me. I can ride down the road and say, what's my favorite scripture today? Like, what do I need to apply in this moment? So I would say, if you want to learn the Bible, what do you need God to say to you today? What topic? If you're interested in wisdom, then Proverbs. In comfort, then Psalms. In who Jesus is, chapters 4, 5, and 6, the Sermon on the Mount, the book of Matthew, if you want to get freaked out, the book of Revelation, you know what I mean? Just wherever your heart is, let God feed you where you're hungry and scratch you where you itch by that word. And now you are applying it because I was looking for an answer and I found it. I'll say this, Jesus was asked over 300 direct questions. He answered 3 of them directly. And everything else was answered with a parable, a question, a story, or some sort of, I'll ask you a question because you asked me a dumb question, I'm not going to answer it. You know what I mean? So what he's doing is he's saying the ground is filled with gold and here's a shovel. Now you're going to mine out, because if I give you a gold ring, that has a certain value. If you find the gold and you refine the nugget and you form the band and you put it on your finger, it's the same amount of gold, but one has a very different value because of the process of gaining that. That make sense?
Most definitely. Yeah. Tell us, how do we get, because my belief is that in life in general, we lack God. We lack the understanding. We lack the presence. We lack the the ability. Actually, I think we lack the ability to be able to talk about it by law in a lot of areas. How do we? Do you feel like that's? I feel like I'm starting to hear more God, and maybe it's just because I'm looking for it. Mm-hmm. But how do we break that down? How do we get back to? There aren't enough policemen. There aren't enough jails. There aren't enough of those things in the world. Yeah. I always feel like people have to have a conscious will. They have to make a decision to do good, mm-hmm. as opposed to be willing to do bad, because, and there's got to be a higher power from that, right? I don't, this is maybe a silly use of words, but I don't not cheat on my wife because just of her. Not that I plan to or
Right.
thinking about it, but I hold myself to a higher standard than that. I know that Jesus is watching me. Yeah. And so if that doesn't exist with anybody and all of these bad things are being done and occurring over and over and over, there aren't enough policemen, and I feel like as Jesus disappears from our day to day, you can't replace it with enough policemen to police it.
Right.
Because we have to voluntarily choose to do the right thing. Yeah. And that choice seems like it's being made less and less.
Yeah. You look at the problems, you say, what's the solution? And if you say, well, if we had more police, then Flint wouldn't have the crime rate it does. But that's assuming that the crime rate exists because the foundational problem is not enough cops to catch people. But that's not the foundational reason.
Correct.
So you said, well, what's the reason? Well, the reason we could go down to say, well, the schools don't have enough money, so let's give them all another $100 million. Did we fix it? No. Now everybody's in a really nice school with bulletproof glass, but the bullets are still flying outside the school. So we didn't fix it. What's the reason? And as you get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, it comes down to the free will of mankind, back to the Garden of Eden, all the way to today. But to give somebody at least a fair chance. We said earlier, a kid doesn't know this is abnormal. I didn't know that. I smoked dope when I was 4 years old for the first time. So I couldn't write my own name.
Did you eat Cheetos after?
Yeah, I don't remember. But I couldn't write my own name, but I knew how to roll a joint. You know what I mean? Right. That was part of having hippie older brothers and sisters. That's normal. Getting caught and going to jail wasn't normal. Rolling a joint, smoking it, going to school in first grade is normal. What happened was, in our environments, things become normal. We have a church up in Flint that we've been with for years and years. They had 2 4-year-olds, and the 4-year-old, 3, 4s, and 5s, 2 4-year-old male children that looked at each other across the room. One looked, the other one looked, and they didn't break off eye contact. They ran each other from across the room and started swinging at each other. We stopped him and said, what's going on? He said he disrespected me. He was looking at me. He didn't look away. Well, what that was is he looked at me. I was afraid. I had to get angry. I started swinging. Now I'm powerful. I won, so can we fix this with more government money, more benefits, more? I think it doesn't hurt to help, but I also think that sometimes you got to get to the root, and the root is we're created for a heck of a lot more than scratching a living, having more children to get a bigger government check, fathering more children so I feel like more of a man. So if we're going to fix Flint, if we're going to fix Fenton, if we're going to fix Mayberry, if we're going to fix Hollywood, we have to start with what do we agree is actually true as a society and to lead towards it. Now, as a pastor, I believe that I've found the ultimate truth. You prove me wrong, I'll believe any other truth greater than Scripture, I'll embrace. I want what's best. If there's a God, and I believe there is, then what's best belongs to him, right? So if you show me through reality that there's certain things that are better than the Bible, I will stop to believe the Bible and I will believe what's better. Problem is I haven't found anything better. You know what I mean? I have found that everyone who embraces the truth of Scripture is changed by that truth. You know what I mean? Those who reject it, but those who embrace it are transformed by it, the renewing of their mind. Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Don't be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. There is a renewing, a metamorphosis. The word renewing there is the word metamorphos. It means a metamorphosis. It's not like I changed my mind, I'm going to vote this way. It's like I'm a changed mind, right. And I'm a changed man because I've changed my mind. So there's just a better way to live, and until everyone gets the opportunity to hear that better way to live that I would call the gospel of Jesus Christ, then they're living a normal life
in their mind.
That really isn't normal.
Right.
Yeah. If it's normal to join a gang, if it's normal to join a church, at the end of the day, which one would we want for our daughter, for our son?
Oh, for sure. And probably they would say the same thing if they're doing it. Yeah. Let me ask you this, and this just kind of came about as we're having this conversation, made me think of something. We've already in some of our vlogs talked about religion in the business place, and I probably have a cross up, and we pray before meetings, and I think a lot of that came from me getting so close to God in that moment of that retreat, and coming out of that and feeding that right back into the business place, and then of course taking some of the guys on the team on the retreat also didn't hurt 6 months later, but we send out a weekly email, and above the whiteboard is the cross that is in our office, and so just kind of setting the stage for whoever's listening. So I'm essentially videoed under the cross, and it wasn't really intended that way. I wasn't avoiding it, but it was just everything that I was talking about was on the whiteboard, and the cross happened to be above. And I actually got a text from somebody one day, and it said, "Be careful mixing business and religion." And it was a screenshot of me standing under the cross.
Yeah.
And I replied, I don't even know what the heck I was talking about. I'm reading the text now verbatim. "God sent his only son.
Mm-hmm.
My belief is, regardless of your religion, as long as it is a loving God, I will not judge that, and I don't expect to be judged."
Mm-hmm.
And
oh boy, was there a response?
nope, no response.
Okay. Interesting.
And so it's just one that goes back to what I said earlier. I know throughout the world there are a lot of people that believe in different gods, right?
Sure.
Some of them are clients of mine.
Yeah.
I have a different belief than they do, but as long as their God is a loving God, go for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I think what people are saying when they say be careful of mixing religion with the workplace is they've had a bad experience with religion, or there's been a hypocrisy amongst the religious that were in business, or the fish on the business card, you know what I mean, the little Christian symbol fish or the cross or whatever. I think there's an expectation of a higher level of morality, service, integrity when that's on there. And I think people may have been burned by people who networked because I go to church, you go to church,
Gotcha.
and they're not, they're con men. But I think I would say, for anyone to say to you, John, what is most important to you should be left out. I never want to see a picture of your wife again. I don't care if you love her and you have a relationship with her. It
She's
offends
blonde
me.
and the whole world likes brunettes.
Yeah. She offends me, and I don't care. It's like, well, then, you're asking me not to hide my wife. You're asking me not to be me.
Well, so here's something really neat too. And again, because I didn't have any of this foundation growing up, this stuff is all, I see this differently than I think a lot of people that started in this religion or that religion or this religion. So the next thing was at Christmas time, I send out every year a postcard to all of the people that we've had the blessing to serve, and also to certain communities that we serve often. And it's a Christmas card, and in our email, "Merry Christmas."
Yeah.
And people would say, "Oh, I'm so glad you put Christmas on there." And I'm like,
you're right.
What else am I going to put?
Or
But I didn't even know that, right? So I'm like, well, what else would I put? It's Christmas time.
Yeah, right.
So I finally, one of the guys that emailed me, I called him, like, what are you talking about? You're like the fifth person that said this. It's like, well, because a lot of people would just put holidays because they don't want to offend anybody. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's way too much to think about with all of this stuff. I just know it's Christmas. There's gifts coming. And now that was enlightened to that, it's Christ Mass and everything that I put.
Yeah, right.
Truly.
We live in a day where there's literally an outrage culture. People are outraged, and the most outrageous thing is that anyone would judge anyone. Like, how dare you? It's funny how it doesn't come back the opposite way. If I were to say, all Republicans, all Democrats, all this color, all this nationality, all this, you know what I mean? There would be people that would have legitimate outrage. How dare you say that? I'm of that political persuasion. I have that color skin. you know what I mean? So the only thing that really, isn't that way was, hey, we need to minimize, the Christian Judeo, message or whatever. And I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, if I get a card from you, it tells me something about you, and if that something is true, then you should put Christmas, whatever. And if it's not true, if it's a marketing scheme, then, shame on the person that puts a cross on their card that's not going to live what that cross stands for, right?
And to that, none of us can every single day be perfect inside of that, right? No. And so, it's like, if I swear, do I believe in God less? Of course not, right? But when you're in a position like we are in here, you're judged on that often.
Sure.
Which, I think God put us in this position because our shoulders can bear it.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with it. So, all right, well, let's just, I think we've gone on, and we could do this, I think, all day, and it's been awesome having you here. Give me your definition of a thoroughbred, an elite or first-class person. What does that mean to you?
I think that the clues to, back to Ephesians 2:10, that we're God's workmanship. We're created in Christ Jesus to do good work. So there's a destiny, there's a destination, there's a purpose for us. I think the people that I know that are accomplishing that have answered 3 questions that really speaks to their why. And that is, what am I most passionate about? What causes me the most pain? And at what do I have the most proficiency? If you think of those things as 3 circles that overlap, like the Olympic flag has 3 circles, there emerges where those 3 circles overlap a sweet spot. I'm passionate about it. It thrills me. It gives me pain. It kills me. I'm proficient at it. It fills me. This is my destiny. For me to say, I was always talking in class, and it was always against the rules until I became the teacher. Now it's what I do. You know what I mean?
Right.
I had every teacher notice my verbal gift. They wrote on a report card and asked my parents to beat me out of it. You know what I mean? Just beat this thing out of me. And it didn't happen because that's what I was created to do, was to talk.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the thoroughbred to me is not the one, like you're saying, they have the most money in the room. That's great. But beyond money, there's a satisfaction of doing what you were created to do. You take a thoroughbred horse and you hook him up to a plow, and you're wasting something. Now, maybe that plow and that horse creates the bottomland and the crop, but that horse isn't happy.
Right.
It might be prosperous, but it's not happy. So to me, the thoroughbred, if you are passionate about what you do and you wake up every morning excited to do it on some level, if it kills you, if there's pain involved, because the greatest superpower we try to ignore is pain. If I were you, I would say, you saw somebody ripped off by a realtor, you're like, I will never let that happen. Like that hurts, that the name realtor, the title realtor,
for sure,
might be suspected instead of respected because of the behavior of others. So I will be with the utmost integrity, because it kills me that people think they can't trust a realtor.
For sure.
And you're proficient at it. You love people, the legal documents.
Yes, I'm in the
forming a
right
team,
place.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think those are the thoroughbreds. The people that find themselves always do better than the people that are doing their imitation of a successful person they hope to be like. So we can glean things from people, but we can't imitate them and be who we're created to be.
Well, and I think that's the trouble with anything, is that when you see something bright and shiny and you're just going to get into it because, like real estate, right? Right now, the market's obviously hot. I'm going to get into real estate.
Yeah.
But you really don't have that deep burning passion for it.
Yeah.
It's probably, there's not a lot of longevity in that.
Yeah.
But I always think about, people when they say, oh, do you know so-and-so? And I've said this before because it happens, not a lot, but occasionally. Do you know so-and-so? No, I don't. Oh, he owns this and that, and it's got all kinds of money. And I will say to them, I don't give a
right.
what they own.
Yeah.
Are they a good person?
Yeah. Who are they? Not what
Exactly.
Are they? Yeah.
So, tell us real quickly, Freedom Center.
Yeah.
When are the services?
Yeah, Freedom Center is 2473 West Shiawassee, so 1 block from where we're sitting right now in your office area here. And services are at 9 o'clock Sunday morning and 11:30 Sunday morning as well. We have a live stream broadcast. Go to our website, TFC, like the Freedom Center, tfconline.church. And you'll see our stuff. Check it out. Sit at home in your underwear and watch it. And if it looks like something you're interested in, come and join us. Put your clothes on, but come and join us.
I got to share real quick, because the last time I was there, and I shared the story with you after service. So my wife was on vacation in Florida with the kids, and I'm trying to get healthy, and I'm on this train of not drinking and working out all the time. And at the service that day, I went that day in particular because I just wanted to be in the music. We always start with music initially, and then we transition. And as I'm there, they announced, Pastor Jim announces, it's going to be all music, so just enjoy the worship. Yeah. And man, it was great. I'm there with my friends, I'm crying a little bit, and then you'd come up and you'd ask a couple questions, and if one of the things was, if there's anything that's on your heart that you want to pray for, Yeah. And in my mind, I was praying for my wife. I wanted her to embrace. It's hard for me to be on this health kick by myself, but more so, I wanted her to embrace it for her. And, an hour later, I'm driving down the road and she texts me. Now, mind you, she's on a beach in Florida with probably a pina colada in her hand.
Right.
So it'd be the least opportune time for her to text me this. And and I mean, I prayed hard on this during the service, right? And she texted me, she said, set up the personal trainer. I need to get in shape. Now, honestly, I'm driving, so I just glimpsed at it. Yeah. I thought she was talking about, when it said trainer, I thought she was talking about get a trainer for our dog. Right. Literally, because we were talking about it. Yeah. And then when I actually read it, I just was moved to tears. And, it was like, holy cow. It was amazing. And so, a lot of amazing things happen when our eyes and hearts are open.
You let God be God. He's really good at it. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I love you. I appreciate everything you do for the community and for the church and for all of us. So thank you.
Thanks.